The dust kicked up in angry swirls as Delilah Lancaster swung down from her horse, her worn boots hitting the packed earth of the Silver Ridge Ranch just as the sun began its climb over the California mountains. And the silence that fell over the assembled ranch hands told her everything she needed to know about what kind of morning this was going to be. Xavier stood on the porch of the main house, his arms crossed over his broad chest, watching the scene unfold with eyes the color of storm clouds. He had hired Delilah 3 days ago in Julian, California, much to the shock of everyone in the small mountain town. It was 1882, and women simply did not work as ranch hands, not in Julian, not anywhere in the West that he knew of. But Delilah had proven herself capable during the brief interview, demonstrating a knowledge of horses and cattle that rivaled any man he had ever met. And Xavier was not a man who let convention stand in the way of good sense. The problem was that his ranch hands did not share his progressive view. "Boss, we need to talk." Jake Morrison stepped forward, his weathered face set in hard lines. Behind him, the other 5 men who worked the Silver Ridge Ranch stood in a loose semicircle, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to openly hostile. "We have been talking amongst ourselves, and we have reached a decision." Nathan did not move from his position on the porch, but Delilah saw his jaw tighten. "That's so. We cannot work with a woman." Jake's voice was flat, final. "It is not right, it is not proper, and it is not safe. A ranch is no place for a female, and we will not be part of this experiment of yours." Delilah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her chin up and her hands steady at her sides. She had expected this, had faced it her entire life. Her father had taught her everything he knew about ranching before he died 2 years ago, and her brothers had scattered to the wind, leaving her alone to make her way in a world that did not want women who could rope and ride and brand as well as any man. "Miss Lancaster was hired to do a job," Nathan said, his voice carrying across the yard with quiet authority. "Same as all of you. I expect my hands to work together, regardless of what is between their legs." A few of the men shifted uncomfortably at the blunt language, but Jake stood his ground. "Then you are going to have to make a choice, boss. Either she goes, or we all do." The morning air seemed to crystallize around them, holding everyone frozen in that moment. Delilah wanted to speak, to defend herself, but she knew that would only make things worse. This was Nathan's ranch, Nathan's decision, and she had to let him make it. Xavier stepped down from the porch, his boots thudding against the wooden steps. He was a tall man, lean and muscled from years of hard work, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same granite that made up the mountains surrounding Julian. He was 30 years old, had built this ranch from nothing over the past 8 years, and every man standing in that yard knew he was not someone who backed down from a challenge. "Then I guess you all better pack your gear," Nathan said quietly. "You will have your wages by noon. I expect you off my land by sundown." The shock was immediate and absolute. Jake's mouth fell open, and even the men behind him looked stunned. "You cannot be serious." "I am always serious about my ranch, Jake. You know that." Nathan's gaze swept across all of them. "I hired Miss Lancaster because she is qualified for the work. If you cannot accept that, then I have no use for you here. You are going to run this place with just her." One of the other hands, a young man named Pete, spoke up. "That is suicide, boss. You have got 300 head of cattle, horses to break, fences to mend, and a dozen other jobs that need doing every single day. Then I suggest you all think real hard about whether your pride is worth your jobs," Nathan replied. "Because I am not changing my mind about Miss Lancaster, and I am not begging you to stay. The choice is yours." Delilah's heart hammered in her chest. She had not wanted this, had not wanted to be the cause of good men losing their employment. But she also knew that backing down now would mean never working on a ranch again, would mean giving up the only life she knew how to live. Jake's face had gone red, anger and disbelief warring across his features. Fine. You want to destroy everything you have built for some woman who probably cannot even sit a horse for a full day's work. That is your choice. Come on, boys. We will find work somewhere that appreciates us. The men turned as one and headed toward the bunkhouse to gather their things, all except one. A young hand named Davy, barely 20 years old, hesitated, looking between Nathan and the departing group. Boss, He swallowed hard. I do not have any problem working with Miss Lancaster. If the job is still open for me, I would like to stay. Nathan studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Bunkhouse is yours, Davy. Get your gear moved to a different room if you want privacy from the comings and goings. Relief flooded the young man's face. Thank you, sir. As Davy hurried off, Nathan finally turned his full attention to Delilah. She met his gaze steadily, refusing to let him see how shaken she was by what had just happened. I did not ask you to do that, she said quietly. I know. Nathan moved closer, and she caught the scent of leather and coffee and something else, something essentially male that made her pulse skip. But this is my ranch, and I hire who I want. They made their choice, and I made mine. You are going to have a hard time running this place with just 2 hands. 3 hands, he corrected. I still work my own land, Miss Lancaster. I am not some gentleman rancher who sits in the big house while others do the labor. Despite the tension of the moment, Delilah felt a small smile tug at her lips. I can see that. Your hands are not exactly soft. Nathan glanced down at his calloused, scarred palms, then back up at her. Neither are yours. That is why I hired you. Now, are you going to stand here all morning, or are you going to help me figure out how we are going to manage 300 head of cattle with 3 people? The smile grew wider. Lead the way, boss. They spent the rest of the morning taking stock of what needed to be done. The Silver Ridge Ranch sprawled across 500 acres of California mountain country, with pastures for the cattle, a stable for the horses, and endless miles of fence that always needed mending. Nathan had been planning to move the herd to the summer grazing lands within the week, a job that normally required all 6 hands working together. We will need to hire more people, Delilah said as they stood in the stable, checking over the horses. There is no way the 3 of us can handle a cattle drive, even a short one. I know. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. But finding hands willing to work with a woman is going to be nearly impossible. You saw how Jake and the others reacted. Then we advertise for people who need work badly enough not to care. Delilah moved to the next stall, examining a pretty bay mare with a white star on her forehead. Drifters, men down on their luck, maybe even some of the Chinese workers from the mining camps. They face enough prejudice themselves that they might not be so quick to judge me. Nathan considered this, then nodded slowly. That could work. I will ride into Julian tomorrow and put out the word. In the meantime, we will do what we can with what we have. The days that followed were some of the hardest Delilah had ever experienced. She was up before dawn and working until well after dark, helping Nathan and Davy with everything from feeding the horses to mending fences to checking on the cattle scattered across the high pastures. Her body ached in ways she had almost forgotten, muscles protesting the constant labor, but she pushed through it all with grim determination. She would not give Nathan Xavier any reason to regret his decision to keep her on. What surprised her was how easy it was to work with Nathan himself. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was always with purpose and clarity. He did not patronize her or try to give her easier tasks because of her gender. Instead, he treated her exactly as he treated Davy, expecting the same level of competence and effort. It was refreshing and exhausting, and somehow exhilarating all at once. On the fourth evening after the confrontation, Delilah was brushing down her horse in the stable when Nathan appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the setting sun. "You did good work today," he said, leaning against the frame. Delilah glanced over her shoulder at him. "Just doing what you hired me for, still. Not many people, man or woman, could have kept up the pace you have been setting." He moved into the stable, picking up a brush and starting to work on his own mount in the next stall. "Where did you learn to work cattle, my father?" Delilah's voice softened. "He had a small ranch up near Sacramento, nothing like this place but big enough to keep us all busy. He always said he did not see why his daughter should not learn the same skills as his sons, so he taught me everything. Roping, riding, branding, even delivering calves when they came at the wrong time. Sounds like a good man. He was." She swallowed against the sudden tightness in her throat. "He died 2 years ago. Pneumonia. After that, my brothers wanted to sell the ranch and move to San Francisco, try their luck in the city. I wanted to keep it going, but 3 against 1 is not good odds. They sold it out from under me, and I have been drifting ever since, trying to find work where I can." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the soft brush of bristles against horsehide. "I am sorry. That is a hard thing to lose your home and your family at once. What about you?" Delilah asked, wanting to shift the focus away from her own pain. "How did you end up with a ranch in Julian? Came out here after the war," Nathan said. "I was just 18, did not have anything keeping me back east, so I headed west like so many others. Worked as a hand for a few years, saved every penny I could, and when I had enough, I bought this land. It was not much at first, just a rough cabin and a few acres, but I built it up piece by piece. No family, not anymore." His voice was carefully neutral. "My parents died when I was young. I have a sister somewhere, but we lost touch years ago. The ranch is my family now." Delilah understood that sentiment all too well. She finished with her horse and moved to put away the brushes, only to find Nathan standing closer than she had expected. In the dim light of the stable, with dust motes dancing in the last rays of sun, she became acutely aware of how tall he was, how broad his shoulders were, how his eyes seemed to see right through her careful defenses. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for keeping me on. I know it has cost you." "It was the right thing to do." Nathan's gaze held hers. "And I do not regret it, Delilah." It was the first time he had used her given name instead of Miss Lancaster, and the sound of it on his lips sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. She saw something flicker in his eyes, something that mirrored the sudden awareness coursing through her own veins, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Davy's voice called out from across the yard, breaking the spell. "Boss, got a problem with one of the calves in the north pen." Nathan stepped back, and Delilah released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Duty calls," he said with a wry smile, and then he was gone, striding out into the twilight to deal with whatever crisis had arisen. Delilah stood in the stable for a long moment after he left, her heart beating harder than it should have been. This was dangerous, she told herself. Nathan Xavier was her employer, nothing more, and she could not afford to let her feelings become complicated. She needed this job, needed the money, and the purpose it gave her. Falling for the boss would only lead to heartache. But as she walked back to the small room Nathan had given her in the house, separate from the bunkhouse where Davy slept, she could not quite shake the memory of how Nathan had looked at her in that stable, or the warmth that had bloomed in her chest at the sound of her name on his lips. The next week brought new challenges and new help. Nathan had put the word out in Julian and the surrounding mining camps, and slowly, new hands began to trickle in. First came a grizzled older man named Chen, who had been working the mines until an injury to his leg made it impossible to continue underground. He spoke English with a heavy accent but knew his way around horses and did not blink twice at the sight of Delilah working alongside the men. Then came two brothers, Samuel and Thomas Reeves, who were down on their luck after their previous employer had gone bankrupt. They were young, barely in their 20s, and seemed more bemused than upset by the presence of a female ranch hand. Finally, a quiet Mexican man named Miguel arrived, recommended by the priest in Julian. He was a vaquero, trained in the old California traditions of cattle herding, and within a day it was clear that he knew more about working a ranch than anyone else on the property, including Nathan. With the new crew in place, they began preparing for the cattle drive to the summer pastures. It would take 3 days to move the herd up into the higher elevations where the grass was still green and plentiful, and every hand would be needed to keep the cattle together and moving in the right direction. The night before they were set to leave, Nathan called everyone together for a meeting in the main yard. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the air was beginning to cool with the promise of a mountain night. "Tomorrow we move the herd," Nathan said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet evening. "It is going to be hard work, long days, and probably some trouble along the way. I expect every one of you to pull your weight and watch out for each other." That means Chen, Samuel, Thomas, Miguel, Davy, and Miss Lancaster. We are a team and we succeed or fail together. Is that understood? There was a chorus of agreement from the assembled hands. Delilah noticed that unlike Jake and the others, none of these men seemed bothered by her presence. They had each been hired with full knowledge that they would be working with a woman, and they had accepted the job anyway. It was a small thing, but it meant everything to her. "Good," Nathan continued. "Get some rest tonight. We leave at first light." As the group dispersed, Delilah lingered, watching as Nathan checked over the supplies one last time. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had done this 100 times before, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of responsibility he carried. "Nervous?" she asked, moving to help him secure a pack on one of the horses. "Always am before a drive," Nathan admitted. "Too many things can go wrong. Stampede, injury, losing cattle to predators or thieves. It keeps me up at night, thinking about all the possibilities." "You have good people working for you now. We will manage." Nathan glanced at her, and in the fading light, his expression was softer than she had ever seen it. "I know. You especially. You have been a godsend, Delilah. I do not know what I would have done without you these past couple weeks." The words warmed her more than they should have. "You would have figured something out. You are that kind of man." "What kind is that?" "The kind who does not give up, no matter how hard things get." She secured the last strap and stepped back. "The kind who stands by his decisions, even when it costs him." "Standing by you was not a hard decision," Nathan said quietly. "It was the easiest one I ever made." Delilah's breath caught in her throat. There was something in his voice, in the way he was looking at her, that made her pulse race and her skin feel too tight. This was more than respect, more than appreciation for a job well done. This was something deeper, something that called to the lonely places in her heart she had tried so hard to ignore. "Nathan," she began, not even sure what she wanted to say, but before she could continue, Miguel appeared around the corner of the barn. "Señor Xavier, one of the calves has gotten tangled in some wire. I could use help." The moment shattered like glass. Nathan nodded, his expression shifting back into business mode. "On my way." He looked at Delilah once more, and she thought she saw regret in his eyes. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Then he was gone, following Miguel into the darkness, and Delilah was left alone with her racing heart and confused emotions. The cattle drive began at dawn, with the herd reluctantly leaving the familiar pastures for the uncertain trail ahead. Delilah rode on the left flank, keeping the stragglers moving while Nathan took point and Miguel rode drag at the rear. The other hands were scattered along the line, everyone working in concert to keep 300 head of cattle moving in the right direction. It was exhausting, dusty work. The cattle were stubborn, constantly trying to break away from the main group to investigate interesting smells or sounds. Delilah spent most of the morning riding back and forth, turning back escapees and encouraging the slower animals to keep up with the herd. Her horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding named Red, was a seasoned cow pony who seemed to understand the work better than she did, often anticipating which direction a cow would try to run before Delilah even saw the movement. By midday, they had covered nearly 10 miles, and Nathan called a halt near a small stream to let the cattle drink and rest. Delilah dismounted with a groan, her legs protesting the hours in the saddle. She led Red to the water and let him drink while she splashed cool water on her face and neck. "You are doing good," Nathan said, appearing beside her. His face was streaked with dust, and his dark hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat, but he looked energized rather than tired. "That stunt you pulled with the bull back around mile 7 was impressive." Delilah had nearly forgotten about that. One of the larger bulls had decided he wanted to go back to the ranch and had tried to push past her, all 2,000 pounds of angry bovine muscle. She had managed to turn him by crowding Red in close and using her rope to swat him on the nose, sending him back to the herd with an indignant bellow. "Just doing my job," she said, though she could not quite keep the pride out of her voice. Still, not everyone would have had the guts to stand up to a bull like that. Nathan crouched down beside the stream, filling his canteen. "You are a natural at this, Delilah. Better than some hands I have had who have been working cattle their whole lives." The praise made her feel warm and flustered in equal measure. My father would be pleased to hear that. He always said I had a gift for understanding what animals were thinking. He was right. Nathan capped his canteen and stood. "You should eat something. We have another few hours before we can make camp for the night." They ate a quick meal of jerky and hardtack, then remounted and continued the drive. The afternoon was even hotter than the morning, the sun beating down mercilessly as they climbed higher into the mountains. Delilah could feel sweat dripping down her back, soaking through her shirt, but she ignored the discomfort and focused on the work. It was near sunset when disaster struck. They were crossing through a narrow canyon, the walls rising steeply on either side, when something startled the lead cattle. Maybe it was a snake, or a mountain lion lurking in the rocks, or just the skittish nature of the herd. Whatever the cause, the effect was immediate and terrifying. The cattle in front bolted, and like a wave, panic rippled back through the entire herd. Within seconds, 300 head of cattle were running in blind terror, hooves thundering against the ground, dust billowing up in choking clouds. "Stampede!" Nathan's shout was barely audible over the noise. "Ride them out, don't let them scatter," Delilah did not think, just acted. She spurred Red forward, racing alongside the panicked cattle, trying to turn the leaders and slow the stampede before it could build to full speed. She could see Nathan on the other side of the herd, doing the same thing, his horse stretched out in a full gallop. Red was fast, but the cattle were faster in their terror. They were heading straight for a stand of boulders ahead, and if they hit that at full speed, half the herd would be injured or killed. Delilah pushed Red harder, urging him to greater speed, and somehow the brave little horse responded, pulling alongside the lead steer. She swung her rope, slapping it against the steer's shoulder, trying to turn him. Once, twice, 3 times she struck, and finally the animal veered to the left, away from the boulders. The cattle behind followed, the mass of the herd beginning to curve as Nathan worked the other side. It took another 10 minutes of desperate riding before the stampede finally slowed and stopped, the cattle milling about in confusion, their sides heaving with exertion. Delilah pulled Red to a stop and slumped in the saddle, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Nathan appeared beside her, his face pale beneath the dust. "You all right?" she nodded, not trusting her voice. Now that the danger was past, reaction was setting in, making her hands shake and her stomach churn. "That was some of the best riding I have ever seen," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved the herd, Delilah, if they had hit those boulders." "We both saved them," she managed to say. "Could not have done it alone." Nathan reached over and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. His touch was warm and solid and grounding, and Delilah found herself holding on like he was the only real thing in the world. "You scared the hell out of me," he said quietly. "When I saw you racing toward those boulders, I thought." He did not finish the sentence, but he did not need to. Delilah understood what he was saying, what he was not saying, in the way his eyes searched her face and his hand trembled slightly against hers. "I am all right," she said softly. "We are both all right." For a long moment they stayed like that, hands clasped, eyes locked, the chaos of the stampede fading into the background. Then Miguel rode up, breaking the spell, and they pulled apart to deal with the aftermath. Miraculously, they had not lost a single head of cattle, though a few had minor injuries that would need watching. They made camp right there in the canyon, too tired and shaken to push on to their planned stopping point. As the men set up bedrolls and started a fire, Delilah took care of Red, brushing him down and checking him over for injuries. "You are a brave one," she murmured to the horse, running her hand down his sweaty neck. "I will make sure you get extra oats tonight. He is not the only brave one." Delilah turned to find Nathan standing behind her, 2 plates of beans and bacon in his hands. "Thought you might be hungry. It is not much, but it is hot." They sat together by the fire, eating in comfortable silence while the stars began to appear overhead. The other hands were scattered around the camp, some already asleep, others talking quietly. It felt intimate, sitting here with Nathan, the warmth of the fire on her face and the cool mountain air at her back. "I have been thinking," Nathan said eventually, setting his empty plate aside. "After what happened today, I realized something." "What is that?" He turned to look at her, the firelight casting shadows across his strong features. "I am glad you are here, Delilah. Not just because you are a good hand, though you are the best I have ever had, but because I like having you around. I like talking to you at the end of the day. I like the way you laugh when one of the calves does something silly. I like how you are not afraid to get your hands dirty or to stand up for yourself. I like you." Delilah's heart seemed to stop and then start again, beating double time. "Nathan, You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know it is not appropriate, me being your employer and all. But after today, after thinking I might lose you in that stampede, I realized I could not keep it to myself anymore. You deserve to know how I feel." "You did not almost lose me," Delilah said, finding her voice. "And for the record, I like you too. I have liked you since that first day when you chose to keep me instead of your entire crew. That took courage, and it told me everything I needed to know about the kind of man you are." Nathan's eyes widened. "Really, really," she smiled, feeling suddenly lighter than she had in years. Though I agree, the situation is complicated. I do not want to do anything that would jeopardize my job or your reputation." "To hell with my reputation," Nathan said fiercely. "I have never cared much what people think of me, and I am not about to start now. But I do not want to make things difficult for you. I know how hard it is for a woman to find work out here, and I would never want to be the reason you lost that." Delilah considered this, weighing her options. She could be cautious, keep her distance, maintain the professional boundary between employer and employee. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice. But when had she ever chosen safe over honest? "What if," she said slowly, "we just see what happens? No promises, no expectations, just—" Seeing where this goes, Nathan's face broke into a smile that made her stomach flip. "I would like that. I would like that very much." They stayed by the fire long after the others had gone to sleep, talking quietly about everything and nothing. Delilah learned that Nathan's favorite color was the blue of the sky just before dawn, that he had a weakness for apple pie, and that he had always wanted to travel to the ocean but had never found the time. Nathan learned that Delilah could play the piano, that she had a scar on her knee from falling out of a tree when she was 10, and that she dreamed of one day having a ranch of her own, a place where she could build something lasting. When they finally retired to their bedrolls, Delilah lay awake for a long time, staring up at the stars and thinking about the turn her life had taken. A month ago, she had been drifting, alone and uncertain, wondering if she would ever find a place where she belonged. Now she had a job she loved, people who respected her abilities, and a man who looked at her like she was something precious and rare. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. The next 2 days of the drive passed without incident, and they reached the summer pastures right on schedule. The high meadows were lush and green, with plenty of water from snowmelt streams, and the cattle settled in happily. Nathan left Miguel and Davy to watch over the herd while the rest of them returned to the ranch to handle the regular work. The ride back was easier without the cattle to manage, and Delilah found herself riding beside Nathan for most of the journey. They talked and laughed, and more than once, she caught him watching her with an expression that made her cheeks heat and her pulse quicken. By the time they reached the Silver Ridge Ranch, something had shifted between them. The tentative connection from the night of the stampede had deepened, becoming something more solid and real. They were still careful around the other hands, maintaining a professional distance during the day, but in the evenings, after the work was done, they would find excuses to be alone together. Sometimes they would sit on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset and talking about their days. Other times they would walk out to check on the horses, their shoulders brushing as they moved through the stable. And once, memorably, Nathan took her on a ride up into the mountains to a waterfall he had discovered years ago, a place so beautiful and secluded it felt like the edge of the world. They stood together at the base of the falls, the mist cool on their faces, and Nathan reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, and Delilah leaned into the touch, her eyes drifting closed. "Can I kiss you?" Nathan asked, his voice barely audible over the rush of water. Delilah opened her eyes and found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "I wish you would." He cupped her face in both hands and lowered his mouth to hers, and the kiss was everything she had been dreaming about and more. It was gentle at first, almost tentative, as if he was afraid she might pull away. But when she wound her arms around his neck and pressed closer, he deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. Delilah had been kissed before, awkward fumbling attempts by boys who did not know what they were doing, but this was different. Nathan kissed her like she was precious, like he wanted to memorize every detail of this moment. He kissed her like he had been waiting his whole life to do this, and maybe he had. Maybe they both had. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." "So have I," Delilah admitted, her hands still linked behind his neck. "I kept telling myself it was a bad idea, that I should focus on my work and not get distracted. And now I think some distractions are worth it." Nathan laughed, the sound rich and warm, and pulled her close again. They stayed at the waterfall for another hour, kissing and talking and simply being together, and when they finally rowed back to the ranch, Delilah felt like she was floating. The summer passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. The ranch prospered under Nathan's careful management, and the new crew proved to be reliable and hardworking. Chen turned out to have a gift for breaking horses, gentling even the most stubborn animals with patience and skill. Samuel and Thomas were eager learners, soaking up every bit of knowledge Miguel and Nathan shared. And Davy, quiet Davy, who had been brave enough to stay when all the others left, grew into a confident and capable hand. As for Delilah, she thrived. Every day brought new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself, and she met them all with determination and skill. She helped deliver a difficult calf, mended miles of fence, broke a particularly ornery mare, and even managed the books for a week when Nathan had to travel to San Diego to negotiate a sale. But the best part of her days was the time she spent with Nathan. Their relationship deepened with each passing week, moving from tentative attraction to something much stronger. They learned each other's habits and quirks, their hopes and fears, the little details that made them who they were. Nathan learned that Delilah loved thunderstorms and hated mushrooms and could swear in 3 languages when she was angry. Delilah learned that Nathan hummed when he was thinking, that he had nightmares sometimes about the war, and that he was terrified of failing, of losing everything he had built. They fell in love slowly, in the quiet moments between the chaos of running a ranch, and it was the most natural thing in the world. In August, Nathan asked her to move into the main house permanently. "I know it is not proper," he said, standing in the doorway of her small room. "But I do not care anymore about what is proper. I care about you, and I want you here with me, not stuck in this little room like hired help." "I am hired help," Delilah pointed out, though she was smiling. "You are more than that, and you know it." Nathan stepped into the room, taking her hands in his. "You are my partner, Delilah, in work and in life. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to fall asleep every night knowing you are close by. I want to build a future with you if you will have me." Delilah felt tears prick at her eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you, Nathan Xavier?" "Not yet," he said with a crooked smile. "I am old-fashioned enough to want to do that properly, with a ring and a speech and everything, but I am asking you to share my home, my life, and my heart. And when the time is right, when we are both ready, I will ask you the other question too." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and joy and hope into that kiss. Yes, to all of it, yes. Moving into the main house was a bigger adjustment than Delilah had expected. It was not just the physical change of location, though the house was much larger and more comfortable than her previous room. It was the intimacy of sharing space with Nathan, of seeing him first thing in the morning with his hair rumpled and his eyes still soft with sleep, of cooking meals together in the kitchen and falling asleep in his arms at night. It was also the way it changed how the other hands viewed their relationship. Before, there had been speculation and sideways glances, but they could pretend it was just gossip. Now it was out in the open, undeniable, and Delilah worried about how the men would react. To her relief, none of them seemed particularly bothered. Chen congratulated them in his formal way, saying it was good for a man to have a strong woman by his side. Samuel and Thomas just grinned and made jokes about Nathan being a lucky man. And Miguel, wise Miguel, simply nodded and said, "It is about time. We all saw how you looked at each other." The only person who had a strong reaction was Davy. He sought out Delilah one afternoon while she was working in the stable, his young face serious. "Miss Lancaster, I just want to say thank you," he said without preamble. Delilah looked up from the bridle she was mending. "For what, Davy?" "For being brave enough to take this job, even when you knew it would be hard. And for helping the boss see that it does not matter if you are a man or a woman, just whether you can do the work." He shuffled his feet. "My sister wants to work on a ranch too back home in Wyoming, but no one will give her a chance. I am going to write to her and tell her about you, about what you have done here. Maybe it will give her hope." Delilah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Tell your sister to be persistent. Tell her to be twice as good as any man who applies for the job, because that is what it takes. But also tell her it is worth it, Davy. Tell her not to give up on her dreams just because the world says she should." Davy nodded, his eyes bright. "I will, Miss Lancaster. I will." As autumn approached, Nathan began talking about expanding the ranch. The cattle sale in San Diego had gone better than expected, bringing in enough money to buy more land and increase the size of the herd. He spent hours poring over maps and ledgers, planning for the future. "What do you think about adding sheep?" he asked Delilah one evening as they sat in the parlor after dinner. "I know cattle and sheep do not always mix well, but if we kept them on separate pastures, it could diversify our income." Delilah considered this, curled up beside him on the sofa with her head on his shoulder. "It could work, but you would need someone who knows sheep. They are different from cattle, need different care and handling." "I know. I have been asking around, seeing if there are any shepherds looking for work." Nathan absently ran his fingers through her hair, the gesture so natural and affectionate it made her heart squeeze. "But that is not really what I wanted to talk to you about tonight." "Oh." Delilah sat up, looking at him curiously. "What did you want to talk about?" Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Delilah's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a single diamond, small but perfect. "I know I said I would wait for the right moment," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "But the truth is, every moment with you feels right. You make me happier than I ever thought possible, Delilah Lancaster. You are my best friend, my partner, and the love of my life. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Delilah's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and the future stretched out before them bright and full of promise. They were married in October, in a simple ceremony at the church in Julian. The priest who had recommended Miguel performed the service, and all the ranch hands attended, dressed in their Sunday best. Delilah wore a dress she had bought in San Diego, pale blue silk that made her eyes look like the sky, and Nathan wore a new suit that made him look impossibly handsome. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives, Delilah thought about how far she had come from that day when she had ridden onto the Silver Ridge Ranch, uncertain of her welcome. She had found not just a job, but a home. Not just an employer, but a husband. Not just a place to work, but a future to build. When the priest pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed her like they were the only two people in the world, and the small gathering erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. They held it at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food prepared by the ladies from town who had heard about the wedding. There was music and dancing, and Delilah found herself whirled from partner to partner as all the hands took turns dancing with the bride. But her favorite dance was the last one, when the sun had set and the stars were coming out, and Nathan pulled her close and swayed with her to a melody only they could hear. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "So happy," Delilah whispered back. "I did not know I could be this happy." "Neither did I, but I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They spent their wedding night in the main house, which was now truly their home, and Delilah felt like the luckiest woman alive. She had never imagined, in all her years of drifting and searching, that she would find someone like Nathan. Someone who saw her for who she truly was and loved her not despite her unconventional nature, but because of it. Life on the ranch continued much as before, except now Delilah was Mrs. Xavier instead of Miss Lancaster, and she wore a gold band on her finger that caught the sunlight and reminded her every day of the vows they had made. She still worked alongside the hands, still rode out to check on the cattle and mend fences and do all the hard, dirty work that ranching required. But now she did it with Nathan by her side, partners in every sense of the word. Winter came to the California mountains, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The cattle were moved down to the lower pastures, and the work shifted to indoor tasks like mending tack and repairing equipment. It was during one of these quiet winter evenings, with snow falling softly outside and a fire crackling in the hearth, that Delilah told Nathan she was pregnant. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, and then a slow smile spread across his face. "Really? We are going to have a baby, really?" Delilah laughed at his stunned expression. "I have suspected for a few weeks, but I wanted to be sure before I said anything." Nathan swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the parlor despite her protests. "We are going to have a baby." "Delilah, this is wonderful. This is the best news I have ever received." "Nathan, put me down before you drop me." But she was laughing too, caught up in his joy. He set her down gently, his hands moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "A baby, our baby. God, Delilah, I cannot believe it." "Believe it. Come summer, you are going to be a father." The pregnancy changed things, though not in the ways Delilah had expected. Nathan became protective, almost overly so, trying to prevent her from doing any of the heavier ranch work. She had to firmly remind him that pregnancy was not an illness, and that women had been working on ranches while expecting babies since the beginning of time. "I am not saying you are sick," Nathan protested after one particularly heated discussion about whether Delilah should be allowed to help break a new horse. "I am just saying maybe you should take it easy, let the men handle some of the more dangerous tasks." "And I am saying that I know my own body and my own limits," Delilah countered. "I am not going to do anything reckless, but I am also not going to sit around like an invalid for 9 months. I will go crazy, Nathan." They compromised, with Delilah agreeing to avoid the most dangerous work, and Nathan agreeing to stop hovering quite so much. But she could tell he worried, could see it in the way he watched her when he thought she was not looking, in the gentle way he touched her stomach every night before they went to sleep. As spring arrived and her belly began to swell with the growing baby, Delilah found herself having to make more concessions. Her balance was off, making riding more difficult, and she tired more easily than before. But she still worked, still contributed to the running of the ranch, just in different ways. She took over more of the bookkeeping, sitting at Nathan's desk for hours and going over the accounts. She planned the schedule for the hands, making sure everyone knew what needed to be done each day. And she started preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and setting up a nursery in one of the spare rooms of the house. Nathan was endlessly supportive, helping with tasks that had once been solely hers, bringing her lunch when she forgot to eat, rubbing her aching feet at the end of long days. He talked to her stomach, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the horses and all the things they would do together when the baby was old enough. "You are going to love it here," he murmured one night, his lips pressed against her belly. "Your mother and I have built something special, and it will be yours one day. But for now, you just focus on growing big and strong so we can meet you." Delilah ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with love for this man who had changed her life so completely. "You are going to be such a good father." "I hope so," Nathan said, looking up at her with vulnerable eyes. "I never had much of a father myself, so I am making this up as I go along. We both are, but we will figure it out together." The baby arrived on a hot June evening, after a labor that lasted most of the day. The doctor from Julian was there, along with 2 women from town who served as midwives, and Nathan paced the downstairs parlor wearing a path in the carpet. When the baby's first cry rang out, thin and strong, Nathan took the stairs 3 at a time to reach the bedroom. He burst through the door to find Delilah propped up against the pillows, exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Nathan approached slowly, almost reverently, his eyes wide with wonder. Delilah pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny face, red and wrinkled with a shock of dark hair and eyes that were trying to focus on this strange new world. "A son," Nathan breathed. "We have a son. We do." "Do you want to hold him?" Nathan nodded, unable to speak, and carefully took the baby from Delilah's arms. He looked down at his son, and Delilah saw tears streaming down his face. "Hello, little one," Nathan whispered. "I am your father. And I promise you, I am going to do everything in my power to give you a good life, to keep you safe, to teach you right from wrong. You are so loved already, more than you could possibly know." The baby made a small sound, one tiny hand escaping from the blanket to wave in the air. Nathan caught it with his finger, and the baby's hand wrapped around it, holding tight. "He is strong," Nathan said with a watery laugh, "just like his mother." "And stubborn like his father," Delilah added, watching them with a heart so full it felt like it might burst. They named him Noah, after Nathan's father, with the middle name Daniel. Noah Xavier, heir to the Silver Ridge Ranch, loved and wanted and already the center of his parents' universe. The first few months with a new baby were exhausting and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Noah demanded constant attention, waking every few hours to eat, crying for reasons Delilah and Nathan could not always decipher. But he also brought a joy neither of them had anticipated, in his tiny smiles and his soft baby sounds, and the way he looked at them with complete trust and love. Nathan was a devoted father from the start. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with Noah when he was fussy, and sang nonsense songs in the middle of the night to help him sleep. More than once, Delilah woke to find Nathan's side of the bed empty, only to discover him in the nursery, holding Noah and talking to him about the ranch and the cattle and everything under the sun. "I know you cannot understand me yet," Nathan would say, "but I want you to know about this place, about what your mother and I have built. One day you will run this ranch, and I want you to be ready." As Noah grew, so did the ranch. Nathan hired more hands, expanded the herds, and bought the adjoining property when it came up for sale. The Silver Ridge Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the region, known for the quality of its cattle and the fairness of its owner. But Nathan never forgot what it had cost to get there, never forgot the men who had refused to work with Delilah and the choice he had made that day. He made a point of hiring anyone who was willing to work hard, regardless of their gender or background. Over the years, 2 more women joined the crew, both of them tough and capable and grateful for the opportunity. The Silver Ridge became known as the ranch that hired anyone who could do the job, and Nathan wore that reputation with pride. When Noah was 2 years old, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, her body knowing what to expect. And in the spring of 1886, they welcomed a daughter into the world, a tiny girl with Delilah's blonde hair and Nathan's gray eyes. They named her Rose, after the wild roses that grew along the fence lines of the ranch, and she was every bit as stubborn and strong as her brother. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan and Delilah ran the ranch together, raising their children and building a legacy that would last for generations. Noah and Rose grew up on horseback, learning to ride almost as soon as they could walk, and they were as much a part of the ranch as the cattle and horses. On summer evenings, the family would gather on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set over the mountains. Nathan would hold Rose on his lap while Noah sat at his feet, and Delilah would lean against her husband's shoulder, content in a way she had never imagined possible. "Tell us the story, Papa," Noah would beg. "Tell us about how you and Mama met." And Nathan would smile and begin the tale, the one about the ranch hands who refused to work with a woman, and the choice he had made to fire them all and keep her instead. "It was the best decision I ever made," he would always say, looking at Delilah with eyes full of love, "because it brought me your mother and she brought me everything else." As the years passed, the Silver Ridge Ranch continued to thrive. Noah grew into a young man who loved the land as much as his father did, and Rose proved to be a natural with horses, just like her mother. More children followed, another boy named Samuel and a girl named Grace, and the house was always full of noise and laughter and love. Nathan and Delilah grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces lining with years of sun and wind and hard work. But their love never dimmed, never faded, never became anything less than the wild, fierce, beautiful thing it had been from the start. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Delilah back to the waterfall where he had first kissed her. They were older now, their knees less willing to make the climb, but they managed it together, just as they had managed everything else in their lives. Standing at the base of the falls, the mist cool on their faces just as it had been 3 decades earlier, Nathan took Delilah's hand and smiled. "I would do it all again," he said. "Every choice, every hardship, every moment of doubt, I would do it all again if it meant ending up here with you." "So would I," Delilah whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "You gave me a home, Nathan. You gave me a family and a purpose and a love I never thought I would find. You gave me everything." "No," Nathan said, pulling her close. "We gave each other everything. That is what partnership means." He kissed her then, and it was just as sweet and perfect as their first kiss had been, all those years ago in this very spot. Some things, Delilah thought as she melted into her husband's embrace, were meant to last forever, and their love was one of them. The Silver Ridge Ranch continued to be run by the Xavier family for generations, passed down from parent to child, each generation building on the foundation that Nathan and Delilah had laid. And always in the main house, there hung a photograph of the ranch's founders, a dark-haired man and a blonde woman standing side by side, their hands clasped, their expressions full of love and determination. Below the photograph was a small plaque that read, "Nathan and Delilah Xavier, who proved that courage, love, and hard work can overcome any obstacle." It was a legacy they had built together, against all odds, and it would endure long after they were gone. Because some love stories are not just about two people finding each other. They are about changing the world, one brave choice at a time, and this was one of those stories. Noah Xavier stood on the porch of the Silver Ridge Ranch, his own son beside him, and looked out over the land his parents had fought so hard to build and preserve. He was 40 years old now, with children of his own, and every day he tried to live up to the example his parents had set. "Tell me about grandmother Delilah," his son asked, and Noah smiled. "Your grandmother was the bravest woman I ever knew," he began. "She came to this ranch when no one wanted her here, when everyone said a woman had no place working cattle, but your grandfather saw past all that. He saw her skill, her determination, her heart, and he chose her over the easy path, over what everyone expected him to do. Because he loved her, Noah agreed, but also because it was the right thing to do. Your grandfather always said that doing the right thing is rarely the easy thing, but it is always worth it in the end." He put his hand on his son's shoulder, thinking about his own children, about the lessons he wanted to pass down. "Your grandmother taught me that being different is not something to hide or be ashamed of. It is something to celebrate. And your grandfather taught me that real strength is standing up for what you believe in, even when the whole world is against you." "I want to be like them," the boy said softly. "Then work hard, be kind, and never let anyone tell you that you cannot do something just because it has never been done before." Noah pulled his son close. "That is what the Xaviers do. We build, we grow, and we never give up." Inside the house, Rose was telling the same story to her own daughter, while Samuel worked the ranch with the same dedication his father had shown. And Grace, youngest of Nathan and Delilah's children, had gone on to open a school in Julian where she taught young women that they could be anything they wanted to be, do anything they set their minds to. The legacy of that single brave choice, made on a dusty morning in 1882, rippled outward through the years, touching countless lives and changing countless perspectives. Because Nathan Xavier had looked at a woman named Delilah Lancaster and seen not her gender, but her potential. And Delilah had looked at Nathan and seen not just an employer, but a partner, a friend, and eventually a husband. Together, they had built something that lasted, something that mattered. They had built a love that weathered every storm, a family that thrived for generations, and a ranch that stood as a testament to what was possible when two people chose each other over everything else. Years later, when Nathan and Delilah were both gone, laid to rest in the small cemetery overlooking the ranch they loved, their story lived on. It was told around dinner tables and campfires, passed down from grandparent to grandchild, a reminder that love and courage can change the world. The Silver Ridge Ranch remained in the Xavier family for over a century, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation laid by Nathan and Delilah. And while the world changed around it, while technology advanced and society evolved, the core values remained the same: hard work, fairness, and the belief that anyone who wanted to could make a place for themselves if they were just given the chance. In the end, that was the real legacy of Nathan and Delilah Xavier. Not the land they accumulated or the wealth they built, but the example they set. The proof that one brave choice made in the face of opposition and doubt could change everything. And it all started with a cowboy who looked at a woman and saw not a problem to be solved, but a partner to be valued, who fired his entire crew rather than compromise his principles, who chose love over convention and in doing so found everything he had ever wanted. That was the story of the Silver Ridge Ranch. That was the story of Nathan and Delilah Xavier. And it was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating for all the years to come. Because in the end, the best stories are not about perfect people who never make mistakes. They are about ordinary people who find the courage to do extraordinary things. And Nathan and Delilah had done just that, building a life and a love that would echo through the generations, inspiring others to be brave, to be true to themselves, and to never give up on their dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem. Their story was one of hope and determination, of standing up for what was right even when it cost everything, of finding love in unexpected places and holding onto it with everything you had. It was a story of the Wild West, of a time when the world was still being shaped and people had the power to create their own destinies. And most of all, it was a love story, pure and simple. The kind of love that comes along once in a lifetime if you are lucky. The kind of love that makes you believe in miracles and second chances, and the possibility of happily ever after. Nathan and Delilah Xavier found that love on a ranch in California, in the mountains above Julian, in a time when such love seemed impossible. But they proved that with courage and determination and a willingness to fight for each other, anything was possible, and they lived happily ever after, just as all the best love stories promise. Their happiness was not perfect or easy or simple, but it was real and lasting and true. They built a life together, raised a family together, grew old together, and loved each other every single day. That was their story. That was their legacy, and it was beautiful.